Hey, listeners, it's AZ. Welcome back for another episode of the podcast. But first, very, very important announcement. The Fire Rescue Wellness Swag Store is currently open, but it is only open until July 14th, 2023 at midnight Eastern Time. If you want to check out the swag, you can click the link in my Instagram bio, or I will put a link in the show notes. People are already starting to get their orders, and let me tell you, it is sweet. Also, by way of another announcement, I recently moved and I'm very close to an airport now. So congratulations and enjoy the sweet sounds of airplanes buzzing over my house during this episode. All right, this is episode number 63, and it was my great honor to sit down with my longtime friend from the ISSN, Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss. Tim was actually the past president of the ISSN, and he also owns several businesses that are dedicated to bringing products, supplement products to market. And he has several patents. We talked about that on the show. But the take-home message for today was the basics of firefighter health and wellness, and then how we could potentially use supplements to boost our wellness. I hope you enjoy this episode. If you do enjoy the episode, please share it with someone you know. And by all means, and for the love of heaven, go check out the swag store. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey, podcast listeners, it's AZ back for yet another episode of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. And today, my very special guest is my friend, Dr. Z. Dr. Z, say hello to my listeners.
Hello, listeners. How are you?
They're great. They're
Happy
great. And he gave a very enthusiastic wave. I forgot to tell him that I don't do video. So
oh, shit. Well,
I know.
That. All right.
Doggone it. It was so good too. And, kudos, because I had Dr. Scott Forbes on the podcast. And when I said, say hello to the listeners, he said, hello, listeners. It was so lackluster. So lackluster.
Well,
so
I'll have to tell that Canuck that I one-upped him for sure then.
Oh, yeah. He may be the creatine guy, but he was not the greeting guy. Well, I start my podcast always with 3 get-to-know-you questions. So I'm going to shine the bright, shiny interrogation spotlight on you if you're ready.
Ready. Go for it.
All right. Who is, in your own words, Dr. Z?
Oh, man. Husband, father, scientist, entrepreneur.
Dog owner.
Dog lover, animal lover. Yeah, because there's 4 dogs here, remember, and 2 cats and a couple turtles and lots of other things. Yeah. Oh, gosh, that's a big part of me. Yeah. I'm a nature guy. I love being outside, and I love animals. And doesn't mean if I needed to, I wouldn't, hunt and shoot and eat what I killed, but I wouldn't just hunt for sport. I'm not that kind of guy. I wouldn't do that. But yeah, that's a big part of me.
I'm already going off script. You live in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, Northeast Ohio. I live about 45 minutes east of Cleveland.
Okay,
and 45 minutes away from the PA border.
Okay, I seem to remember a story. I don't remember if you told me in person or if it was on one of your social medias. One of your dogs brought home a giant bone off of some sort of animal.
That was a deer, yeah. And that happened over several days because the deer pieces kept appearing. It was like the hind quarter the first time, and then, something else the second time. And my wife was horrified because she's more of an animal lover than I am. Like, she swerves for earthworms in our driveway. So, yeah, it's a little ridiculous. But, Ruger and Remy found some deer parts. And because we have coyotes around here. I don't think there's a lot of wolves, but we have coyotes. And every now and then they'll drag down a deer. But, yeah, that was interesting for a couple days.
All right. Back on script.
Yep.
Next question. What sets your soul on fire?
What sets my soul on fire? Um, Giving 100% in everything I do. So, you know, the first question was, who is Dr. Z? And I said, husband, father, scientist, entrepreneur, animal lover. And so those things are what sets my soul on fire. That's my why. That's why I do what I do.
Love it. And I feel like this is going to be a long answer. And if it's not, I'm going to just start feeding you pieces of it. How are you changing the world?
Yeah. I think, again, it all stems back from, it all goes back to the first question. Being the best husband I can be, being the best dad I can be to my kids. I have 5 of them, so I'm trying to populate the world with good people. In today's day and age, there's a lot of people out there that maybe shouldn't be having kids, and so can I say that? Because I think that's the truth. And so when you have the opportunity to contribute to the world in a positive way and raise kids in a way that I think will move the world forward, then that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I'm trying to do. Same thing in terms of my science and my business models. I own a research lab, and I've owned a clinical lab for 23 years. We do research to try to get people healthier, to make people healthier. It started off with sports nutrition back in the day, but now we do research on everyone from 8 to 80, basically. And probably because I'm getting a little older too, right? Like we said earlier, I'm 55. So now instead of just worrying about how strong I can get or how lean I can get or so on, now I'm worrying about brain health, heart health, gut health, so on. So my research focus in the lab has expanded over the last 10 years or so. So my research hopefully will change the world for the better as well. Because in a world where I've been in the dietary supplement space for most of my career, and there's a lot of shitty companies out there, right? There's a lot of shit, but there's also a handful of really good ones. And I think the bad apple tends to spoil the bunch for a lot of people, and they think that all dietary supplements are tainted and adulterated and they're useless and everybody's a snake oil salesman, and that's just not true at all. So I like to highlight the companies that are responsible and that do have good products and the ingredients that do promote improvements in health and performance and everything else. So,
and that is the absolute reason I wanted to have this conversation today. But I want to go back for 1 second to your basketball team of children. Now, not only are they gorgeous children and so
Thanks.
Nice, but they're all athletes, right?
Thanks. Yeah. They we were fortunate to have a group of friends and support system where the kids were all involved in some kind of sport. So from the very beginning, it was like every little kid, they play baseball and they play basketball and they play soccer and so on. They did martial arts and so on. And then as the boys got older, the 3 boys, they zeroed in on soccer and football, and then it ended up being football. And they all played at some point college football. So that's a big at all 3 divisions, at Division 1, 2, and 3. So that's pretty cool. And then the girls are, they did softball when they were younger. They did tumbling and gymnastics and so on. Now my youngest daughter is playing lacrosse for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's been pretty awesome. And we had that house where everyone was always throwing a ball around, and diving on the couch to catch it, or in the pool diving to catch, all that stuff. And from very early on, we decided we weren't going to yell at them for jumping on the furniture because it helps build coordination and so on. So yeah, it's been great. It keeps them out of trouble, right? You keep kids busy in sports, and hopefully they have good coaches and good teammates, and again, a good parent group. And you can learn a lot of really positive lessons from sports. Now you can learn a lot of bad ones too, right? So we've tried to, emphasize the good lessons and de-emphasize the bad ones.
I think next time that I trip over the couch or the chair, I'm going to chalk that up to sports-specific training. I don't do much jumping on them, but I do a lot of tripping over them.
Yeah, it's great.
There we go. All right, so I feel like you have probably listened to my bullshit enough at various conferences and talks, you probably know the answer to this question. And also, your brother-in-law, is he still a firefighter?
He is, yeah. So now he's a deputy chief. So he's like, what is there, chief, and then at least in the town, the city that he's in, there's two deputy chiefs, right? And so he's one of the two big shots. Yeah. He'll probably retire soon. He's, let's see, 2 years younger than I am. So he's 53. His name's Bob Evans. I asked him for his permission to make sure that I could mention him by name on your show. And he gave me the green light. So I'm okay to do that. But yeah, so his name's Bob Evans, which is great. That's a great talking point, right? And he really is that. He's like the mayor. Like everybody knows Bob. Everybody loves Bob. Everybody's, but he's beat up, man. He's been in the fire service for a long time. And so physically and mentally, I think more physically than mentally, he's beat up. Back problems, shoulder problems, knee problems, foot problems at some point. So I can't blame him for wanting to hang up the white shirt.
Yeah. Well, through the conversations with me and the conversations with your brother-in-law, I feel like we have set you up for success for this pop quiz. But what are the two top ways that we are losing our firefighters on duty? So on duty, line of duty deaths.
Oh, deaths. Well, you have physical fitness standards, right? So it can't be due to physical fitness, but maybe it is. Because cumulative fatigue takes place, right? Over a period of, and we were talking about it before we started recording, the fragmented sleep patterns, the disordered eating stuff that you have going on, the stress, and then all the potential injuries that you have throughout a career. So my guess would be, you're physically unable to do what you need to do to complete your task, whatever it is.
So this might surprise you, but complications of cardiovascular disease and accidents, whether that's motor vehicle accidents, whatever, falling off a roof, whatever, but primarily complications of cardiovascular disease. So that's the on duty. And then the off duty, which also might surprise you, cancer and suicide.
Cancer doesn't surprise me. You guys are exposed to nasty shit a lot. So
nasty shit.
Nasty.
You're right.
Yeah.
So
based on Canadian wildfires. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the air quality even in Illinois is not good right now.
Yeah. No. There was a tweet by our local fire department. I can't see how this is accurate. Maybe it is. Maybe They said being outside for just a few hours was equivalent to smoking 3 packs of cigarettes. And I'm like, sounds a little extreme, exaggeration to me, but I don't know. But 20, 46, or 20 cigarettes in a pack, I don't even know. 20, 46, 60 cigarettes just for being outside in a couple hours. I mean, it was bad here, but I can't imagine it was that bad. But that puts some of what you just mentioned earlier in context in terms of cancer and exposure to really nasty stuff in your for your lungs and so on. So.
Yeah, I think your fire department's tweet sounds like fake news, but I can't confirm nor deny. Well, okay, based on that information, so we're losing our firefighters on duty, cardiovascular disease and accidents, off duty, cancer and suicide. Let's talk about some approaches both from nutrition and from potential supplementation. So we already talked about sleep. Let's just kind of take that off the table.
Okay.
We know we need to sleep better. We know we need to emphasize getting quantity and quality and not to de-emphasize its importance, but let's take that off the table. And then let's talk about nutritional approaches, because this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So, I've been in the firehouse, the fire stations over various times for the last 20 years, and I see what these guys eat. They love to cook and they love to eat, and maybe I'm stereotyping, but it's not always the healthiest. So I think that's where you start. I mean, the base of your plan here for good cardiovascular health, you already have. Depends how active your station is, I guess. You already have physical activity covered. Maybe not in the exact way to optimize cardiorespiratory fitness, right? But you're certainly physically active. So that part is somewhat covered. But dietary wise, boy, I mean, I don't see a lot of firemen eating salmon 2 or 3 times a week and getting a lot of omega-3s in their diets, or a lot of fruits and vegetables, because we know 80% of the regular public doesn't get enough fruits and vegetables in their diet. And so the whole idea of the Mediterranean diet, I always liked that one. It made sense to me. And I think that's based on some recent research, one of the better ones to try to follow, right? Where you have heart healthy fats like omega-3s and so on. You have fruits and vegetables that are just loaded with, all your vitamins and minerals that you're probably not getting on a regular basis. They're supplying electrolytes for hydration. All those things are critical when it comes to, the underpinning of a solid diet, right? And then meal frequency, right? I don't know, everything's crazy now. Like, is fasting good for you or not for autophagy? Maybe it is. Sure. Is intermittent fasting good? Maybe. How about just 3 squares? People are going back to the 3 squares a day. Maybe. The answer is all these are probably useful, and it depends on the person, right? It really depends on how you're set up individually. Because some people get up, I don't know about you, but I'm not a big breakfast guy. So I'll get up, I'll have a cup of coffee, maybe I'll put some protein in it, maybe not. And then I go to the gym. And then, so my first real meal of food is not breakfast, because I really don't eat breakfast, other than some protein in my coffee. It's post-workout. It's a post-workout meal. So for me, I'm already doing 12 to 14 hours of fasting every day before I have my first meal. But yeah, circling back, the main things that I think are important for boosting cardiovascular health in all of us are, minimizing the intake of pro-inflammatory omega-6s that you find in fried foods, right? That everybody loves because they're really yummy. Minimizing those. And my dear friend Hector Lopez, who passed away, he was fond of saying the best way for most people to improve their omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in their body is to nix the 6.
Oh, Hector. I love that.
Yeah, nix the 6. Eat less pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, like fried foods, like you get in fried foods. In other words, you can't outkick a crappy diet by just taking a bunch of fish oil tablets or capsules or gels. You can't do it. It's really, really difficult. So.
Well, that's a great quote from Hector. I love that. And I want to go back maybe 2 minutes, rewind. And you said a word that some of my listeners may not be familiar with, and that's autophagy. Can you explain what that is and why we would be even interested in it?
Yeah, autophagy is one way that the body sort of breaks down old, damaged cells and then replaces them with new ones. And so fasting is thought to do that. Saunas are thought to do that. Maybe some dietary supplements that are out there may do that. We're not sure. The research is very early on in those. But it's seen necessary, or in most cases, as a good thing. Like, you replace the cells that are worn out and not working right with new ones that are working right correctly.
Oh, like the cells in my knee.
Yeah.
Replace those worn out ones.
Need some stem cells in there. Yeah.
For sure. The other thing you mentioned was the Mediterranean diet. And it's very interesting. Many firefighters, there was a little study done where they said, does this diet sound good to you? The Engine 2 diet, or they explained some other diet. And firefighters were like, yeah, that Engine 2 diet, that sounds like a great idea. So then they went back and they said, does a vegan low-fat diet sound good to you? And they're like,
no.
The fuck no. Well, that's what the Engine 2 diet is.
Yeah.
But in the same study.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, it does emphasize fruits and veggies and beans and nuts and all that, but also, lean proteins, with the exception of, again, fish, the omega-3 fats. So, but yeah, you can get a lot done. And I'm not pro-vegan by any stretch of the imagination, but you can get a lot done in terms of health. If most of your plate, instead of having a plate that's 90% protein and 10% vegetables and fruits, maybe sort of the opposite, or maybe even 50-50, you know what I mean? Yeah, that would probably be a healthier way to go. And I was born in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, and I was a meat and potatoes kid. So it was like meat and mashed potatoes and gravy, boy, maybe a side of corn, whatever, but that was it. My food really didn't have a lot of color. I didn't have yellows and greens and reds and all that stuff. I had white, which was my potatoes, and definitely gravy on there, and then meat. And it was pork and chicken and steak and all that stuff. And I loved it, and I still love it, But I forced myself, and I have been for the last 20-ish years or whatever. A lot of what I eat, I don't love the way it tastes. I just do it because I know it's good for me, and I got it. And it's about discipline, right? Freaking do it. Just do it.
Really important question. On those mashed potatoes, you mentioned gravy. Brown gravy, yellow gravy, white gravy. Tell me about the gravy.
Oh, I love that. All of the above. I'm down. Whether it's chicken gravy, beef gravy, pork gravy, love it. I love crock pot meals where you use the juice in the crock pot as the damn gravy. I'm in.
All right, I'm dying. Okay, back to the intermittent fasting, because I do know that at least probably 2 gentlemen at my department have been doing intermittent fasting for a while, and they're very, very happy with the results and how they feel, and they just have a lot of energy. They feel mental clarity. They're just like all over it. And then there's the women at the department that have tried it, and it's a no. It's a no for every female I have ever met that works in a job like ours. It's an absolute no. Tell us why that might be.
Yeah, listen. I've been married for 26 years, but that doesn't mean I'm an expert in female physiology. That's for damn sure. So it's a very females are a very, very complicated machine. Why do you think most research is done in men first?
Because Abby Smith-Ryan wasn't on it yet.
I love Abby. Yeah, well, because it's an easier machine to understand. There's so many dials and switches and stuff that are going on and off all at once and so on. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, the whole male versus females and what might work best for one sex versus another, that's a rabbit hole, man. I'm not sure anyone really understands it. But it all comes back to what is sustainable, right? I don't want to talk about what the perfect diet is, and it's the one that's healthy but sustainable, right? The whole idea that, well, I'm going on vacation in 4 weeks or 8 weeks, so I'm going to go on a diet because I need to lose 10 pounds or 15, whatever it is. Okay, kudos to you. But what about the other, 40 some weeks of the year? Right? I mean, if you follow the 80-20 rule, do what you should be doing 80% of the time, and then the other 20% of the time, man, just be human and let it rip. Okay? But that's not what most people do, right? I think most people sort of do the opposite. Maybe 80% of the time you let it rip, and then the other 20% of the time is, well, I got to be at a wedding. We just got invited to a wedding reception, or again, we're going down to Myrtle Beach in 6 weeks, and so on. So. And that, cycling of body weight can be detrimental in some people, right? The, up and down weight fluctuations, it makes it harder to lose weight over a period of time in some people than in others. So, I think it's better to have a solid base most of the time and do what you're supposed to do most of the time. And then again, then you can let it rip when you see the need or feel the need.
I always go back to, I believe it was Dr. Lee Norton had a presentation quite a few years ago at ISSN, but he had a graphic, which was the before. So it was a round stick figure, and then the after, a stick figure, and then the after, which was, right, twice as big as the original. So
right.
We have to keep in mind that there's consequences for everything that we do.
Yeah. And some of the competitors out there that see that pushback are right. The female fitness and physique competitors see that. I think gymnasts see that. I think ice skaters see that again in the female areas because weight is pushed on them. You need to be a certain weight and shape and so on to be able to compete, which I think is horrible, right? So there's a lot of pressure, social pressures put on females, and so I think maybe you guys are just more sensitive and sensitive creatures, right? You're, and again, I'm stereotyping, but there's more societal pressures, I think, on females, and so that complicates the physiology even more because then you have the psychology, impacting the physiology. So
that is the worst. And we mentioned Dr. Abby Smith-Ryan Dr. Abby Smith-Ryan in passing, but for real, she is beginning to do research in females and
Yes.
insisting that other researchers do the same.
Yeah,
Because
she's
it's
really
just,
leading the charge. Yeah, down at UNC Chapel Hill, right? She's
mhm.
fantastic. If there are any listeners there that either are thinking about going into this area or have relatives or sons or daughters or nieces and nephews and so on, send them down to Abby Smith Ryan at UNC. Yeah, she's great.
She does have some qualifications to work in her lab. You have to run and you have to lift heavy objects. So if you haven't been on a training program, start now if you want to work with Abby.
Right.
Okay, so let me summarize. We said in order to help improve our health profiles, we need to focus on protein. We need to focus on our fruits and vegetables. And we need to, as Dr. Lopez would say, nix the six. So getting rid of those inflammatory omega-6s. What else? Anything else that we could think about from just a food perspective before we move on to your wheelhouse?
Foods, boy, that pretty much well, I mean, the importance of fiber, and if you do fruits and vegetables right, you're going to get your fiber, and beans, of course, you're going to get your fiber to keep your GI tract healthy and so on. So I think that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. When saying, focus on protein, well, I had a fried chicken sandwich or whatever. Well, yeah, but you got the fried, so that's the six. So try to do try not to do it fried next time, right? And that's the other thing. And I love steak, and I eat steak once a week, right? I just had a steak last night, actually, for dinner, and I love it. But mostly what I eat is, chicken and poultry. I eat poultry and I eat fish for the most time. You shouldn't eat red meat 5 days a week. It's probably not ideal. And again, there's a hot debate out there. Well, what if it's grass-fed beef versus regular? Blah blah blah. We just don't know. And people say that the data are clear. I don't think they're being truthful. It depends whose data you're looking at, right? Everyone can sort of pick out the studies that support their premise and their position and then say, see, here's the evidence, right? But when you look at everything collectively, you really got to know how your body responds to this stuff. And so I don't know how often you guys are able to get blood work done, at the station, but getting blood work done more than once a year, it's got to be twice a year, ideally maybe 3 times a year, right? That way you know what your cholesterol levels are, what your vitamin B12 levels are, what your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is in blood. Some of these markers that are there that are really important, homocysteine and CRP and some of those markers that are out there for cardiovascular health. Those would be great. If cardiovascular disease is the number one killer in firefighters, then you should be tracking biomarkers of cardiovascular health, and you should be doing it more than once a year.
So let's dig down that rabbit hole, because most fire departments in my area at best are getting blood work once a year, and it doesn't include any of those things that you're talking about. It's a comprehensive metabolic panel. It's a
lipid panel, probably a CBC with diff, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Urinalysis.
Which, by the way, in my lab cost me all those 3 things together probably cost about $40.
Incredible.
It's like $40.
That's incredible.
So, you know what I mean? Like, what's the reason to not get it done more than once a year? And I would surmise that if you have a crappy diet, and cardiovascular disease is a huge issue, then fasting blood sugar and prediabetes is also probably prevalent, because in the general U.S. population, as prediabetes and diabetes is going crazy. That's why, these GLP-1 inhibitors, which originally were intended to treat diabetes, are now being probably overprescribed for people for weight loss. And they work. They're effective. But we don't know, what's going to happen to a pancreas that we asked to squirt out a little more insulin every day because we're taking a GLP-1 inhibitor over 20 years. We're not really sure. I'm not sure we know. But in the short term, they're definitely important. So anyway, that blood work should be offered. It's easy. I wish we could come up with a way that, listeners could contact my lab, because I could certainly email a rec form from my lab to a listener and get blood work done at my cost or a little bit over my cost, so that again it wouldn't be covered by insurance. But is it worth $40? 2 or 3 times a year to know these things? Might be. It might be.
Well, and for a bit of time, I was working with a Dr. Sean Arndt, and we were looking at
I love
putting
Sean.
together. I know, isn't he great?
Yeah.
We were putting together a blueprint for athletes. Basically, you can order it up yourself, and he
Yeah.
and I were trying to design the best possible panel for firefighters. And then I don't even know what happened. We both got really busy, and it never got done. But we were going to do it through my website.
Yeah, you should rekindle that conversation. Hector and I did that. We worked with the Jacksonville Jaguars years ago, and part of what we did was we brought everybody in and we screened them, and we had their original, the CBC, the lipid panel, and the comprehensive metabolic panel, and we had everybody, but we added in like RBC magnesium, because we know magnesium is again another one of those minerals that almost 70 to 80% of the U.S. population do not ingest enough magnesium to even meet the daily value, right? Let alone what's optimal for their health, right? So we did RBC Mag, and we did a bunch of omega-3 to omega-6 and a couple other things. And then we would, based on that and their dietary intake records, because we'd have them do a dietary intake, 3-day, 5-day, whatever it was, we'd collate all this information and say, okay, if this is the way you really eat, and this is when we take a look under the hood, this is how your body is running. Here's what we think you should do to fill in the gaps, to address those limitations, right? Make these dietary changes and make these changes to your supplement regimen. And by the way, we're going to be back in 3 months, and we're going to run the same blood work, so we'll know if you did it or not.
Ooh, I love it.
How do you think that went over? I would say 70% of the time, the blood work didn't really change much at all. And when we asked them, did they follow our recommendations, they said, nah, not really. Because they're bulletproof, right? They're Iron Men. I'm good, man. I'm a Spartan. I can do what I want and perform. I can eat what I want and perform whatever way I want, and my body will be fine.
When you're 23?
When you're 23 and you're making millions, yeah.
Well, let's dive down a little bit. So you mentioned CRP, you mentioned a couple of other tests, but
Yep.
Give me the list. Give me the lowdown. What would you order for firefighters?
Yeah, so C-reactive protein for sure, probably high sensitivity, CRP. I would do RBC Mag because we know magnesium is critical. I would do homocysteine. I would do a regular, obviously a lipid panel and your chem panel, your basic metabolic panel. And I would do the omega-3 to omega-6 because that's predictive. That's a very, very strong predictor of future cardiovascular events. And that's not that much, half a dozen things, But I think that gives a pretty comprehensive picture of your risk levels, your risk factors, or your risk level for a future cardiovascular event.
I think we're on to something. More to follow.
Sounds good.
All right. So you are involved in several companies. You have several patents on supplements, correct?
Right. Yeah. I think, there's 20 or 30 or something, and there's a bunch pending and so on. Yes. So how that works is, right, you submit it in the US, and then you submit it, the patent cooperation trade, you submit it to the EU, and you can go, to Asia, and you can go to Australia, and so on and so on. So it might be one idea or one invention, and it might have 15 patents on it. And the 15 patents aren't 15 different patents. It's the same patent. It's just in 15 different countries.
Okay. And are any of those supplements something that might be valuable for my listeners?
Yes, I think so.
Tell me more.
The first two patents are on caffeine metabolites called teacrine and dynamine, and so they're just leave it at caffeine metabolites. For you're a biochemist, so they're methyl urates. So and what they do, they're pretty unique because we know caffeine, right, is the most used/abused stimulant / supplement out there, whether it's energy drinks or pre-workouts or whatever it is. So we invented those ingredients about 7 years ago. And the reason why they're helpful and I think relevant is that it allows you to use less caffeine. So these are not meant to replace caffeine. Let me put that up front. They're not caffeine replacements. They're sort of add-ons. So instead of using 200 or 300 or 400, milligrams of caffeine, you can use half that amount or a third of that amount or a quarter of that amount in combination with one or both of these ingredients. And it smooths out you get just as much energy, but it smooths out the irritability and it removes the crash that you get from most people. And I don't know about you, but I always sort of crash on caffeine. I always used to. I'm not, as I get older, I use less and less caffeine. But so those are patented. Those are out on the market. They've been on the market. They're in a couple hundred products probably on the market already, mostly in the sports nutrition channel. But they're starting to get some traction in some other channels as well, health and wellness and so on, because they help improve mood and focus and concentration. And actually, you mentioned Sean Art. He did a couple of studies for us looking at military personnel, ROTC guys and so on, and the ability, and also female soccer players, that was a couple of years ago, looked at the ability of those two ingredients in combination with caffeine so in the ROTC folks, their ability to maintain performance during shooting, during different type of shooting tasks. And in the female soccer players, basically their ability to concentrate and during later stages of a simulated match. How good were they in terms of decision making, reaction time, and so on. So I think there's definitely a place for those. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it's unheard of for firefighters to be having 600, 800 milligrams and above per day. I mean, not this we, but we as a group, heavy abusers of caffeine.
Sure.
And so do
you think it's mostly coffee though? Because I really think there's a difference now. Because coffee, I think the caffeine delivered in a coffee bean is probably much healthier than caffeine delivered as an anhydrous powder in a pre-workout or a capsule.
So I would say yes, coffee. And as Nancy Yes would say, coffee is not just happy brown liquid. We can recognize that. But energy drinks and pre-workouts.
Yeah, understood.
And so if I'm understanding you correctly, my firefighters could significantly cut down on the amount of caffeine they're consuming. But if they were supplementing with one of these two supplements you mentioned, have a similar effect.
Yeah.
In terms of psychomotor vigilance,
exactly.
energy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, readiness, performance readiness, and so on. Yes. Yeah. And there are, I can't think of one by name right now, but we're just starting to break in. Everybody wants to get in energy drinks, right? Because they're so damn popular. So all the ingredients that are on the market want to try to get into energy drinks, right? And just recently, I think there's been a couple of energy drinks that have included these ingredients in them. So I can get back to you on that information if some of your listeners want some specific recs on that.
Absolutely. In the show notes, people. All right. I interrupted you. Let's keep going with possible supplements that might be helpful for my listeners.
Yeah. So there's one that I know of that I'm not, is not an invention of mine, but a buddy of mine, and Hector actually put it together. It's called Smart Prime. And Smart Prime it's very, very, very interesting. It's patent pending. We actually just finished a pilot study on it in my lab. Smart Prime is a combination of a couple of different, it's like sesame extract and MSM, and maybe a B vitamin. But basically, the idea here is that you improve your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in blood without taking any omega-3s. So, and I'm not sure of the biochemistry. As I wish the other person besides Hector was Dr. Ryan Yates, who's a Ph.D. Ph.D. at Ole Miss. And so it's basically his invention. And it's, like I said, a way to optimize the fatty acid biosynthetic pathways to upregulate omega-3 production and downregulate omega-6 production. Pretty cool.
Very cool, and sounds like it would be very helpful with
Right.
our cardiovascular disease risk
Right.
profiles.
Right. The other ingredients that I have that are out there are mostly in sports nutrition. So there, I have an ingredient that helps with beta alanine, reduce the itchies and tinglies and burning sensation if you use beta alanine. I don't know how many firemen are using or firefighters are using beta alanine, but that might be of interest. Hector and I put a product together called NAD3, which is in the anti-healthy aging space to try to help, sort of keep more rubber on the road, keep the tires from, you can't put rubber on the tires, but maybe you can help the rubber stay on the road a little longer. The normal wear and tear. That's called NAD3. And let's see what else. There's a sports nutrition ingredient called 3D Pump. Very, very, very interesting. Who doesn't love a good pump, right? If you're lifting in the gym, it's cool. It's called 3D Pump. It's a combination of L-citrulline and two other ingredients that help sort of maximize blood flow and that whole muscle volumization that you get when you're training. So we just actually published a study demonstrating that in humans. So.
And I want to remind the listeners, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not going to be able to go to GNC and find 3D Pump, right? These are ingredients.
You'll find 3D Pump in the supplement facts panel of the product. So if you go on Google and you look for 3D Pump, you'll see a product that's out there that has 3D Pump in it, right? You can't go to GNC and say, I want some 3D Pump, because they won't have any. They'll have products that contain 3D Pump, yes. Or they'll have products that have NAD3 in them, yes. But they won't have those ingredients. And by the way, obviously, since I invented those, I get a royalty, so thank you very much. And I'm just putting that out there because I don't want everyone to say, he's biased and that's why he's recommending those. So, but I really believe them, and they're patent pending, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, when we publish research demonstrating safety and efficacy, not done in my lab, but done at someone else's lab, and we do that. So one of our main, Abby's done studies for us, Abby Smith-Ryan, Tricia Van Dusseldorf has done studies for us, as you know. Sean Art's done studies for us. Mike Roberts at Auburn, who's a genius level guy, great guy, humble guy. He's done studies for us. So I'm pretty confident that when you work with, scientists of that caliber, that you can be pretty sure what you're getting is not snake oil. So.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I have one final question before the wrap-up question, and it is this. Every year, well, not this year, I didn't get to go, but every year when I go to ISSN, I learn about a novel supplement, and it sounds like a wonderful thing to take, and so I then add it to my stack.
Okay.
And so now I have an old lady pill box of supplements. Okay, this is not where I want to be in life. I want to streamline.
You should see my pantry. Oh, man.
Right. But for the typical firefighter, they're not going to do what I do every Sunday, which is divvy out my supplements.
Yeah.
So how does the typical firefighter, who I've spoken to Dr. Joey Antonio, Scott Forbes, Katie Hirsch. We've talked about protein. We've talked about creatine. We've talked about omega-3.
Yep.
Vitamin D. So, that's kind of like a typical.
Vitamin D is something I wanted to, and don't sleep on vitamin D, because I don't know how much sun exposure you guys get, the guys and girls get when you're in turnout gear, you're not getting any, right? So unless you're hanging out outside, polishing the fire trucks, you might get some there, but again, on your arms, on your face, but it's not like it's whole body exposure. And so that's another one. Let's add that to the list for firefighters. The blood work list. Vitamin D / 25 hydroxy's got to be on there. It's got to be vitamin D. Yeah.
So if we're recommending to the typical firefighter, yes, probably some protein, creatine, omega-3, vitamin D, that's doable. Now, when we start with the other things, it quickly becomes overwhelming unless you're very systematic. Right. And so I guess my question is, how do you not turn into me? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, you got to start with the big stuff. And I think you mentioned the big stuff, vitamin D, omega-3s, some creatine. We know creatine's not just good for muscle, but it's good for brain. It's good for bone. It's good for heart. No brainer. It's got to be in there. Whether you're male or female, creatine's got to be in there. But I would add one too. And that would be like curcumin / turmeric or curcumin. So curcumin as a spice, right? If you eat food from India, you get a lot of that, but most of us don't. So curcumin it's good for joints. It's good for your brain. It's good for the heart. It's good for your gut. It has anti-cancer properties. It's very, very, and I can say that because I don't have a curcumin product on the market, so I'm not getting in trouble. But that's part of my daily schedule too, curcumin. So I don't do pre-workouts all the time, you know what I mean? But I do take I do have my bottled water, and in my bottled water that I take to the gym, I have 5 to 8 grams of creatine, and I have EAAs in there. I have essential amino acids in there, i.e. protein, right? That's what I take when I go to the gym. And then when I get home, I do my normal meal, like I said, my post-workout meal. But my daily supplements, multivitamin, multimineral, omega-3s, vitamin D, not so much now because it's summer, right? But in the winter or fall, actually, that's when I would start adding vitamin D back in. And again, and you probably know this, but there is a new form of vitamin D that Hector helped bring on the market. And I have it on my notes. It's called D, like small d, and then period, velop. Okay? This is calcifediol. Calcifediol is a form of vitamin D that's already active. So when you take vitamin D3, D2 or D3 that you get in every multivitamin that's out there, they have to undergo a 2-step conversion, first in the liver and then in the kidneys, before they're converted to the active form of vitamin D, calcitriol. Okay, and not to get too deep in the weeds here, but this develop form of vitamin D, it's calcifediol. It's already skipped the step in the liver, so it's immediately active, and it raises blood levels of vitamin D 3 times faster and higher than regular vitamin D. Why that's important is because if you go and you have your vitamin D tested and they go, holy shit, you're like almost clinically deficient vitamin D. Well, why is that important? Well, because vitamin D is one of the major factors controlling immune function. Like, you really got to pay attention to this, right? The problem with that is, okay, I'll take vitamin D. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to impact whole body levels of vitamin D. Not so with this new form, with this develop calcifediol form. It brings levels up 3 times faster. So that's critical, I think. That's one that should be in everybody's pantry come September, because that's when you need to start taking it.
Okay. And it is available now, though. It's on the market now.
Yes. Yep.
Quick side question. Yeah. Why do essential amino acids taste like a goat's asshole?
Yeah, it's rough. It's aminos, are hard to flavor, right? You got sulfur residues and you got all this stuff that's why you'll never see, hardly ever, a chocolate or a vanilla or whatever. It's always a fruit or an orange or a lemon or a strawberry or whatever, because those the masking agents they need to use, right? The flavor package has to be a lot different. But on the upside, 10 to 15 grams of EAAs is equal to 30 to 40 grams of whole protein. So they're over, gram per gram, they're over twice as anabolic, right? In terms of what they do in muscle. So if you're trying to reduce calories, let's say you're on a diet and you're trying to reduce calories, replace one of your protein meals with EAAs and you'll reduce calories. That's one way to do it.
Listeners, this was my mistake. I got unflavored essential amino acids.
Oh, God. Yeah, good luck.
So bad.
Good luck, yeah.
I almost threw them away when I moved.
Yeah.
All right, I have one more. I'm just dying to ask this question. We hit on it a little bit, but I want you to tell me about the dogs.
About the what? The dogs?
The dogs.
Yeah. So I've been a German Shepherd guy my whole life. My dad was a police officer, so they had canine and so on. And both my grandfathers were police officers at some point. My wife's dad was a police officer, so police and fire my whole life, basically. And so German Shepherd as a breed has always been one of my favorites. And so, yeah, we have Remington, who's 5, and we have Ruger, her son, who just turned 3. Rem had 9 puppies, all healthy, 3 years ago. Can't believe it. And now we're looking for a girlfriend for Ruger. So if any of your listeners have a female German Shepherd, boy, he is a handsome, well-mannered young man who I would like to breed and then have one of the puppies. So, but we also have 2 rescues. My wife is, she goes, I'm just going to go donate some food and some blankets to the, rescue. Yeah. She's gone there twice in the last, 10 years, and we had 2 rescues because of that. So, and they're awesome. So Cash and Foster. Yeah.
It's incredible. As soon as I said the dogs, they just went nuts and started barking. So funny.
Almost like they heard you. Yeah.
It's almost like they heard me. All right. Well, I want to give you the microphone to leave us with a final thought or maybe even a summary of what we can best do as firefighters to address our overall health.
Yeah. Do the things that help you de-stress. I think stress is so overbearing in today's society, but it's one thing to have a stressful existence at home, right? But then when you're at work and it's stressful at work too, that's sort of like the double whammy. So find things that help you find your center. And I don't know whether it's for some people that's exercise, for some people that's a hike out in nature. For other people, it's petting a dog or spending time with animals. But identify the thing that helps you find your center and de-stress, right? I love music. I get up in the morning, I have a Sonos system in the house, and I immediately put music on. It helps me de-stress, right? I go to the gym, my headphones are on. I'll turn around and go back home if I don't have my headphones because I need my music when I train. That's one of the ways that I de-stress. And know that everything you put in your mouth, right, makes up who you are, right? Our cells are constantly being built up and broken down. Our brain cells, our bone cells, our muscle cells, everything, right? And you are a culmination of the energy that you put into your body. So if you want to run like a Formula One car, don't put shit fuel in it for a Pinto.
Well, I think that is probably a pretty good summary, and maybe we should have just started out with that and then gone and had a beer, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I'll buy it. If I ever see you again in person, let's have that coffee or beer, whatever it is.
Next year at ISSN. Well, listeners, I really appreciate you listening, and I appreciate Dr. Z's time. And with that, I think we can drop the mic and say AZ and Dr. Z are officially